Welcome to Real English Journey. If you've ever listened to Americans and thought, why are they speaking so fast? If you've ever felt that you know English, but real conversations sound like noise, then this video is for you. Because the truth is uncomfortable, but powerful. Americans do not speak fast. What feels fast is something else entirely, and once you understand it, English stops sounding like chaos. Most English learners experience the same moment. You understand English in class. You understand English in writing. You even understand English when people speak slowly. But the moment you hear Americans talking to each other, your confidence disappears. Your brain freezes. Your thoughts stop. And one sentence appears in your mind. They're speaking too fast. But that sentence is a lie. Not because you're wrong, but because your brain was trained to hear English the wrong way. Let's look at a real example. You hear an American say, "What you gonna do?" Your brain hears a blur. It sounds rushed. It sounds unclear. Now let's write it correctly. What are you going to do? This is basic English, nothing advanced, nothing complicated. So what changed? Not the speed, the connection. Americans don't separate words when they speak, they connect them. This is the biggest illusion in English. Learners believe Americans speak faster than everyone else. In reality, Americans speak more smoothly. Fluency creates the feeling of speed. Imagine two people walking. One stops every step. The other walks without stopping. Who looks faster? The second person, even if both move at the same speed. That's exactly how American English works. Textbooks teach English as written language, clear pauses, complete pronunciation, every word respected. But spoken English follows different rules. When Americans talk, they don't think about grammar, they don't think about pronunciation, they think about meaning, and meaning flows. Here's where listening breaks. Your brain expects English to sound like writing, but Americans speak in sound patterns, not words. When they say, "Did you eat yet?" your brain waits for, "Did you eat yet?" Instead you hear, "Jeet yet." Your brain doesn't recognize it, not because it's fast, but because it doesn't match the pattern you learned. English is not pronounced evenly. English is a stress-based language. That means only important words are clear. Listen carefully. I want to go to the store. Those words carry meaning. Everything else becomes smaller. Words like to, you, of, for don't disappear randomly. They reduce because English doesn't need them loud. This is reduction, not speed. This explains why Americans sound confident. They don't stop between words. They speak in chunks. Instead of building sentences word by word, they release entire ideas in one flow. That flow feels fast to learners, but natural to native speakers. Now here's something important. Trying to speak faster will never fix this. Speed doesn't create fluency. Flow does. Your goal is not to rush. Your goal is to connect. When you start listening for connections instead of words, English suddenly becomes clearer. Say this sentence slowly. What do you want to do tonight? Now say it naturally. What do you want to do tonight? Same sentence, same meaning. Nothing fast happened. You just heard real English. This is why people struggle for years and then suddenly improve in months. Nothing magical changes. They simply stop listening for words and start listening for patterns. And once that switch happens, English finally makes sense.
What you're really hearing and why your brain misses it. Now that the biggest illusion is gone, we need to talk about what your ears are actually hearing. Because once you understand this, listening stops feeling random. Most learners believe they don't understand English because vocabulary is too hard, accents are too strong, Americans don't pronounce words clearly. But none of that is the real reason. The real reason is much simpler and much more frustrating. Your brain is listening for the wrong thing. When you listen to English, you're probably trying to hear every word. You're waiting for clear word boundaries, full pronunciation, and clean pauses. But spoken English doesn't offer that. Americans don't speak in words, they speak in sound groups. And if you listen word by word, your brain will always be late. Let's look at what really happens in American speech. Take this sentence. I'm going to call you later. In textbooks, every word is equal, but in real speech, Americans only care about meaning. So the sentence becomes, I'm gonna call you later. What disappeared? Nothing important. The idea stayed the same. This is where reduction comes in. Reduction means some words lose strength so others can stand out. English needs contrast. If everything is loud, nothing is clear. So English does this naturally. Important words get stronger. Small words get weaker. That's why Americans don't pronounce everything clearly. They're prioritizing meaning, not form. Let's talk about small words because they are the biggest problem. Words like to, you, of, for, These words carry grammar, not meaning, so English shrinks them. Going to becomes gonna. Want to becomes wanna. Have to becomes have to. Not slang, not laziness. This is normal spoken English. Here's the mistake learners make. They hear, I gotta go, and think, I don't know this word. But gotta is not a new word. It's just got to, spoken naturally. Once you realize this, your vocabulary suddenly doubles without learning new words.
Now let's talk about linking, because this is where English really changes shape. When one word ends in a consonant and the next word starts with a vowel, Americans connect them. For example, pick it up becomes pick it up. Turn it off becomes turn it off. Call him becomes call him. No pause, no separation. Your brain expects breaks, but spoken English doesn't give them. Then there's sound deletion. Some sounds disappear completely. Example, next week becomes next week. Friends becomes friends. Handbag becomes handbag. Americans are not speaking incorrectly. They're choosing efficiency. Your brain, however, is still waiting for every letter. This is why listening feels exhausting. You're trying to decode English like a puzzle, while Americans are sending full ideas in one breath. By the time you understand the first word, they're already finishing the sentence. It feels fast, but it's actually late processing. Here's an important mindset shift. You don't need to hear everything. You need to hear enough. Native speakers don't hear every word either. They listen for stressed words, intonation, and rhythm. Your brain should do the same. Let's try an example. Listen to this sentence. I didn't mean to say that. In real speech, it becomes, I didn't mean to say that. You don't need every sound to understand it. Your brain fills the gaps automatically once it knows the pattern. This is how fluency works. Another illusion learners have is thinking, if I don't hear it clearly, I don't understand it. That's false. Understanding comes from prediction. Americans predict language constantly. You can too, but only if you stop demanding perfection. Here's what fluent listeners do differently. They don't panic when they miss a word. They stay calm and listen forward. Learners panic, stop, translate, and fall behind. Fluency is not about catching everything. It's about staying with the speaker. This is why listening practice alone doesn't always help. If you listen without understanding how English changes in speech, you're just repeating confusion. But once you recognize reductions, linking, and disappearing sounds, your brain starts recognizing English as English, not noise. This is also why subtitles feel comforting. They give your brain the structure it's missing. But the goal is not subtitles. The goal is teaching your brain to expect spoken English, not written English. Here's a simple exercise. When you listen to English, stop asking, "What word is this?" and start asking, "What idea is this?" Meaning comes first, words come second. Once you shift your listening this way, something changes. English doesn't sound fast anymore. It sounds connected, predictable, human. And suddenly, conversations stop feeling impossible. This is the second layer. Once you remove the illusion of speed and understand what you're really hearing,
Rhythm, the invisible system of English. At this point, one thing should feel different already. English no longer sounds completely chaotic. It still moves fast sometimes, but it no longer feels random. And that change happens for one reason only. You're starting to notice rhythm. Rhythm is the invisible system behind spoken English. You were never taught it in school, you were never tested on it, but native speakers use it every second. Rhythm is not speed. People confuse these two all the time. Speed is how fast words are produced. Rhythm is how energy moves through a sentence. English moves in waves, strong, weak, strong, weak. Once you hear that wave, the language stops attacking your brain. Let's slow everything down mentally. Look at this sentence. I didn't know you were coming. On paper, it looks neutral. Every word has the same importance. But in spoken English, that does not work like paper. In real life, it sounds closer to, I didn't know you were coming. Two strong points. Everything else fades. Your brain doesn't need more. This is how native speakers listen. They don't hear sentences as lines of text. They hear peaks of meaning. Those peaks guide understanding. When learners miss this, they panic. They try to catch everything. That's when English feels fast. Here's something uncomfortable but important. If you try to hear every word, you will always be behind. Spoken English moves forward constantly. It does not wait for you to analyze it. Fluent listeners stay with the speaker, not behind them.
Children understand this instinctively. They don't know grammar terms. They don't know vocabulary lists, but they hear rhythm. They hear when a sentence is finished. They hear when something important is said. They hear emotion through stress. Adults lose this skill because they overthink. Let's take another example. I was going to call you after work. In natural speech, I was gonna call you after work. 2 beats, clear direction. Even if the middle is unclear, your brain fills it in. That is not guessing, that is pattern recognition. Now here's a critical mistake learners make. They pronounce English evenly. Every word gets the same weight, the same attention. This feels logical, but it breaks English completely. English needs contrast. If everything is strong, nothing is strong. Say this evenly. I want to go to the store. Now say it with rhythm. I want to go to the store. The second one sounds alive. The first one sounds mechanical. This is why Americans drop sounds. They are not careless. They are protecting rhythm. Rhythm also explains confidence. Confident speakers don't rush. They don't speak louder. They keep a stable rhythmic pattern. That stability makes listeners relax. Your brain trusts rhythm. This is why English sometimes feels exhausting. You're not tired because English is hard. You're tired because you're fighting its rhythm. Once you stop fighting, listening takes less energy. Here's a powerful shift. When listening, stop asking, "What word was that?" Start asking, "Where is the stress?" Stress tells you what matters, what doesn't, where the idea is going. That's enough for understanding. Listen to this. You should have told me earlier. In real speech, you should have told me earlier. Even if some sounds disappear, the message is perfectly clear. This is fluent listening. Another key point. Native speakers do not hear English clearly all the time either. They miss sounds, they mishear words, but they don't panic. They rely on rhythm and context. Learners panic and fall behind. Once you start listening rhythmically, English becomes predictable, and predictability is comfort. That's when English stops sounding fast and starts sounding normal. This is the foundation. Without rhythm, nothing else works properly. With rhythm, everything becomes easier.
When English finally feels natural, at some point, English changes its weight. It doesn't suddenly become easy. You don't suddenly understand everything, but it stops feeling heavy. You stop bracing yourself before listening. You stop preparing to fail. And that shift is quiet but powerful. This moment doesn't come from learning more rules. It comes from letting go of the wrong expectations. You stop expecting English to sound clear, slow, and separated. You stop demanding perfection from yourself, and English finally starts cooperating. Most learners believe understanding English means hearing every word, but native speakers don't listen that way. They don't hear language as text, they hear it as movement. Meaning moves forward even when sounds disappear. Once you accept this, listening becomes calmer. This is why people often say, "One day it just clicked." What actually clicked was not vocabulary, it was not grammar, it was the listening strategy. They stopped trying to control English and started trusting patterns. Confidence in English does not come from speaking fast. It comes from staying relaxed while English moves. When you are relaxed, your brain predicts naturally. Prediction is the real secret of understanding. Think about your native language. You don't hear every word clearly. You don't analyze sentences. You predict. You anticipate. You fill in gaps automatically. English works the same way. Once your brain stops panicking, something interesting happens. You start understanding more, not less, even though you are listening less aggressively. Because tension blocks understanding. Calm creates space. This is also where speaking changes. Many learners think speaking comes later. First listening, then grammar, then confidence. But in reality, listening and speaking grow together. When your ear understands rhythm, your mouth follows. You stop building sentences word by word. You stop translating in your head. You start releasing ideas in chunks. This is why speaking often feels blocked. Your brain is overloaded. You are translating, checking grammar, correcting pronunciation, all at the same time. That pressure kills flow. Fluent speakers are not perfect. They hesitate, they restart, they change direction mid-sentence, but they stay inside the rhythm, and rhythm carries meaning forward. At this stage, mistakes stop feeling dangerous. They don't define you. You stop apologizing for your English. You stop saying, "Sorry for my English." You simply speak. English stops being a performance. It becomes communication.
You stop asking, "Is this correct?" You start asking, "Did they understand me?" That question changes everything. Listening changes too. You don't need subtitles all the time. You don't translate every sentence. You understand enough, and that is enough. You begin to trust yourself. Even when you miss a word, even when a sentence is unclear, you stay with the speaker, and staying with the speaker is fluency. This is how English becomes part of your life, not a school subject, not a test, a tool. You stop preparing English in advance. You stop rehearsing sentences. You start responding naturally. And that's when confidence feels real.
The original question disappears. Why do Americans sound fast? They don't. They never did. They speak with connection. They speak with rhythm. They speak with intention. And now you hear that. English slows down because your brain finally knows what to listen for. Not words, not perfection, meaning. This was never about talent. It was never about intelligence. It was about learning to hear English the way it is actually spoken. And once you hear it this way, you cannot unhear it. Conversations feel clearer. Voices feel calmer. And English finally feels human. Thank you for watching. See you next time on Real English Journey.